The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Project Nerd as a whole.
I could let them know about the sorrow and the happiness that the future has in store for them. Maybe they could learn from it.
Let's dive deep.
Let's dive right in.
We're gonna dive deep into this.
Let's deep dive into this.
This is Diving Deep.
This is Diving Deep.
This is Diving Deep.
This past Monday, hand-selected electors from all 50 states met across the country to officially cast their vote for the President of the United States. As expected, and legally what was supposed to happen, Joe Biden was awarded 306 Electoral College votes and declared once again, for the third time this year, the President-elect of these United States. But even with this milestone achieved, Donald Trump continues to make false claims that he won the presidential election, leading to not just the Electoral College receiving more attention than it has ever before, but also leading to countless acts of attempted fraud, attempted disenfranchisement of votes, and actual acts of violence all across the country. With only a ceremonial act left in January, where the Congress will meet in a joint session to recognize the Electoral College votes, Biden has secured his place in history as the 46th president. But as the Democrats get ready to take the White House back from one of the most corrupt and vicious presidents in the history of this country, it's the Republican Party that will likely remain in the spotlight for the foreseeable future. Because not only in the way Trump handled the election, but in the way he handled his presidency and the way he dictated his own party over the past 4 years, Trump has killed the Republican Party as we know it, and it's what's ahead that remains uncertain. Welcome to Diving Deep. In this episode, we're going to explore what I mean by RIP GOP. That's right, the Republican Party is gone, but what is ahead? As noted, it was confirmed for a third time this week that America kicked Donald Trump out of the White House. His term was one and done. The deed is done. The people have spoken, the electors have spoken, and even the courts, something Trump worked so hard to stack in his favor, have spoken. More than 84 million Americans went to the polls in November to make sure Trump would no longer be president. And although the numbers are clear, and even the eyes of the federal and state government fair, Trump and his allies are still rallying the troops with false claims of the election. And it's not completely clear what Trump's end goal is. Even with the many guesses we have, we don't know for sure. He knows he lost. Even behind closed doors, he has admitted it and has started planning for the next steps in his political and professional career. But through false claims, recounts, more than 50 failed attempts to get judges to overturn the results, and even illegally asking states to select electors that support him, Trump preaches to his faithful from his mighty Twitter account that those who claim otherwise are traitors to this country and Republicans in name only. That's right, in the eyes of the Republican voter base, you're either a patriot, aka a Trump supporter, or a traitor, aka anybody else. Trump spent 4 years preparing for this. He came into the 2020 election preparing to lose and trying to take it through the courts, a strategy that started as far back as 2016 when he was first elected. But even with all these years of prep, the appointments of hundreds of conservative and faithful judges and justices, and years of selling his base on the fake news rhetoric, a distrust in mail-in voting, and his countless of other disgusting transgressions, every effort is appearing to fall flat on its ass. Even the Supreme Court, the very court that includes 3 justices that Donald Trump appointed himself with the very goal of protecting his own rights, not conservative rights, spent the past month telling Trump and his allies to stop. Federal judges all across the country, many also appointed by Trump, told him that, quote, simply claiming fraud does not make it so. The latest of all these efforts coming from Ken Paxton, the Texas Attorney General, a man trying to get into the national spotlight and more importantly on Trump's pardon sheet by staging one of the most bizarre state versus state suits we've ever seen. As bizarre as it was huge, and the case saw a huge boost, or what some would think as a boost, when Congressman Mike Johnson, a Republican from Louisiana, at the instruction of Donald Trump, circulated an email from his personal account, one that was obtained by multiple news outlets, and it was sent to other GOP members on December 9th, asking them to join a friend of the court brief to be filed in support of the effort spearheaded by Paxton. By the time the case reached its very quick and obvious demise at the steps of the SCOTUS, a total of 126 Republican members of Congress had publicly signed on in support, asking the Supreme Court to throw out millions of credible votes in specific battleground states that Joe Biden had won. Due to the fact that Trump and his allies have found no evidence of mass fraud, that's right, zero evidence, this last-ditch effort put forth by a pardon-hopeful Texas Attorney General actually hinged on the claim that those 4 states, and again, only those 4 states that Biden won, changed their election rules and procedures too close to the actual election and didn't claim fraud. But before we get too far off on this topic, let me remind you that Paxton is the Attorney General of Texas. Yes, the same Texas that within just a couple of weeks leading up to the election made it to where counties across the entire state were only permitted 1 drop box for absentee and mail-in ballots, including counties like Harris County, a more liberal hotbed in Texas and home to over 6 million people. A considerable change just ahead of the election. The obvious desperate nature of these cases that hold no value, no evidence, and no facts is pathetic. There is every sign to point to the fact that not only did Trump lose fairly, but that any and every claim his camp has come up with has no basis or truth. Yet millions of people still believe he is somehow the rightful winner of the 2020 presidential election. In fact, as of the Monday morning earlier this week leading up to the Electoral College meetings, less than 40% of registered Republicans believe the results of the election to be true, and just 23 Republican members of Congress have publicly acknowledged Biden's victory. Trump's supporters are even marching and calling for violence. They are calling the Supreme Court Obama's Supreme Court, even though 3 justices were appointed by Trump. And Republicans who are acknowledging Biden's victory are being declared as traitors or rhinos, aka Republicans in name only, making this run at false claims from MAGA a clear indicator that this is no longer about the United States. It's not even about Republicans versus Democrats. It's all about sheep faithfully drinking the Kool-Aid that the GOP's new overlord is serving them. But why? Why is Trump still playing this game? He's not an idiot. He knows he lost. What is he up to? Could Trump's motive be to continue campaigning and raising money from the MAGA faithful? It would make sense, knowing that he's raised north of $200 million since the election has ended, all money going to super PACs, meaning there's no set legal requirements to ensure that money gets to only campaign and Republican presidential efforts. Additionally, Trump's campaign has sent out emails regarding the runoff happening in Georgia. The emails directly ask for money, and in the fine print, it says that over half of it goes to Trump's super PACs and goes nowhere near Georgia. So as he continues to line his failing businesses' pockets with that money, one also must realize the delusions of grandeur Trump is so well known for. He knows he didn't win, but with a selfish prick like that, it doesn't matter. He still thinks he can take whatever he wants, including the presidency, and there will never be consequences. I mean, there's been no consequences for his involvement with Russia, for the way he's treated women and minorities, for his support of white nationalists, and for his business that sit in $100 million of debt. The very fair and real events of November 2020 have now become a joke in December. A joke that sees the white supremacy group Trump so vocally supports, the Proud Boys, march to the streets in support of their orange overlord, stabbing anybody that gets in their way. But as those things will become a thing of the past, the fears many have in Trump and his allies campaigning and purposely sowing this distrust in our election system will have real value for those that disagree with Trump. Or maybe they'll have more value for Trump. This pathetic attempt at retaining a presidency he shit all over is only destroying the party he claims to stand for. As great as that sounds, it doesn't actually lead to a win to those that oppose a party that's become so completely backwards thinking and openly racist. At least not without continuous action from those that care about others and a Democrat Party that often plays too nice with their vile opponents. Yes, his games could give immediate leverage to those on the opposite side of the aisle, but sadly it's a leverage that the Democrats likely won't retain beyond a single Biden term. Well, how will the Democrats squander this? Well, there's already a strong belief that President-elect Joe Biden will only serve 1 term as president. Being over the age of 80 by the time the 2024 election rolls around, the expectation has been that the reins will be handed at the time to Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, a woman of color. So maybe I said the Democrats will fumble this, but it's more so America. Knowing that 74.2 million people voted for Trump and that Kelly Loeffler still finds her chances at retaining a Senate seat possible and likely, it's hard to believe that this country will have shed its very obvious racist foundation in just 4 years' time. A foundation brought into the public by Trump and his MAGA faithful, feeling secure in showing their true colors and feelings to the level that some are comparing it to the Jim Crow era. I try to keep these podcasts unbiased, and in the end, I am aligned with no political party. But the past 2 months have made me incredibly disappointed in this country, members of my family, and many others. Just pay a quick visit to Twitter and see the amount of people that are truthfully asking Trump to even install martial law and to do whatever it takes to retain power. It's disgusting. And although at first glance the GOP Foundation cracking seems like it could give Democrats and forward thinkers an opportunity, it's this large, racist, sexist, pseudo-Christian base that will once again ensure this country stays on the path of division and hate, even if the GOP party is in many ways dead. But what do I mean by dead? And what do I mean that it could benefit those on the opposite of the aisle and, or more specifically, Trump? Well, let's start by looking at Georgia and attorneys Lin Wood and Sidney Powell, the place where all this change is sure to start. As I record and this initially airs, we've already started early in-person voting for 2 Senate runoffs on January 5th, both taking place in Georgia. The Republican candidates, Kelly Loeffler, who has recently posed with members of the KKK and is against the WNBA's call to action on social matters, and one David Perdue. 9 months ago, Loeffler was a shoo-in. Perdue might have even avoided a runoff in a special election in November in many other years. But Georgia looked very different this year, and these two are actually a bit worried about what's ahead in January. With the state's popular vote choosing Biden as the president, and therefore its 16 electoral college votes going that way as well, the runoffs in January that feature Loeffler versus Democrat candidate Raphael Warnock and Perdue running against Democrat Jon Ossoff now probably stand as the most important pieces of any of the 2020 elections. If the Democrat candidates can win both runoffs, the Senate joins both the presidency and the House of Representatives as being controlled by a single Democrat party. Something that many months ago seemed unlikely, but with both Wood and Powell stating at a MAGA rally in late November to not participate in a rigged election to other Republicans, some Trump Republicans could be staying home for this runoff, and that could be a final nail in the coffin to this party. In normal cases, a runoff, much like midterms, always benefits the conservative side. The turnout of heavily populated urban areas will not be as high as they were last month during a monumental election, at least not with Trump officially out of the running. And with both parties giving the runoffs national attention and ridiculous amounts of money, it starts to look like this actually could be anybody's game. The impact of the runoff will be immediate. If Republicans retain control of the Senate and Moscow Mitch remains the main man in power for that group, Biden's tasks will become very difficult over the next few years. But if the Democrats win both runoffs, sweeping change could be possible as soon as January 20th next year, and for as long as 2 years, maybe even 4. But that declaration from Trump's allies is a message being spread across the nation, not just held firm in Georgia. A message the Republican Party doesn't really want out there, even though Trump does. And that's because Trump's allies are telling Republicans not to do the one thing they do far better than Democrats: turn up and vote. Republican voters are there every election supporting their candidates, usually without a care in the world who it is, as long as it's not a socialist Democrat. And even though national Gallup polls have shown that consistently for years now, more Americans identify as Democrat or Democrat-leaning, Republicans win elections in big part because of this. And the runoff won't be the single thing that's the death of the GOP party. It's all of this build up to it, the distrust that Trump and his camp are sowing in the entire system itself. Trump's unmatchability to dictate what Republican voters do and say has caused their politicians to follow what Trump does and says as well. And this is becoming a thing more and more candidates are done dealing with. A 2-party system could become a 3 or 4-party system as early as the next midterms. Think about it. McConnell just accepting the fact that Biden has won has already caused people from the QAnon conspiracy group to break off and say they're starting 2 separate parties. Does it seem that far-fetched to see Trump pulling strings of puppeted politicians within a MAGA party that's running alongside a Republican party? It would be destructive to the conservative political agenda, but that is something Trump has shown he has no concern about anyways. Republican goals, even the big business ones, are not Trump's priority. At least not above himself and his own business. And with Trump declaring on Twitter that those who speak the truth that Biden is the president-elect are against him and traitors of this nation, it'll be hard for some of those Republican politicians to fall back in the good graces with a group of voters so absurdly hanging on to every claim and word Trump speaks. It may sound crazy, but his faithful are not relenting, and they aren't going away. A CNN study conducted this week shows that 1 in 5, yes, 20% of Americans surveyed, believe that Trump was one of quote, the greatest presidents in the history of this country, end quote. And more than 60% of Republican voters believe this election was dishonest and fraudulent, including roughly 35% believing that Trump was without a doubt, in their mind, the actual winner of the presidential election. I mean, as noted, the man has raised $250 million off of suckers since this election is wrapped. And even though big money backers have broken away from handing him cash to stay in the pockets of those that actually did win, that amount of money raised and those survey results show us that even away from the White House pulpit, Trump can tell MAGA to jump, and they're going to ask how high. And as political analysts and young voters that do care about this country sit here and worry about the damage Trump is causing to our election system, the division within a party and the distrust within a system all fall really on those conservative voting shoulders. And although Trump sowing distrust in the system and putting himself ahead of the party are two huge causes to a future weaker GOP, they're not the only ones. His promise to return in 2024 is another act that will keep Republicans in disarray for up to 4 years. And that's because over the past 4 years, it has become painfully clear that if you are a Republican politician, you either bow down to Trump or you get dismissed as a traitor and a scapegoat. Politicians have lost complete respect and authority within their party and from their base because Trump declared it to be so. If the GOP party holds it together or mends itself by 2024, Trump may still have power over the decision makers at the national level. And that could lead to a vile and destructive primary for a party that usually falls in line much more quickly than the Democrats. Could you even imagine a Republican voter talking like a Bernie Sanders supporter, declaring they will stay home because their candidate's not the one on the ballot? It would lead to resounding success for the Democrats, and even though no president election is on the books for 2022, more power in the House and Senate are in play during that election. But much of this could be hopeful thinking. A reinvention of the GOP party is much more likely than a divided and conquered group of racist old white men. And this might be something that those wanting progress and change in the country will have to hold out hopes for, knowing the aforementioned results are much less likely. And as he heads out of the White House, Trump's 2021 looks pretty busy. Plenty is going to be coming his way, mostly bad, things like lawsuits, cases of rape and sexual misconduct, legal questions around his debts in Europe and China, and the huge stack of impeachable offenses that he didn't have to answer for over the past 4 years. Trump's State Department, especially in the past 2 years with Barr as the AG, has made a mockery of our laws and Constitution. And with him out of power, it's likely that law and Constitution will be back in fine form and knocking on his door. But none of that stopped Trump before 2016, and it's not going to stop him after he's done with the White House. The conservative base, the one that claims to vote on family and patriotic values, didn't even think twice about pouring out undying loyalty to this crook over the past 4 years. So theoretically, Trump could dictate a Republican side of the election in 2022 and 2024, even if he's wearing an orange jumpsuit. A very unlikely scenario, being that he's rich, but a scenario that wouldn't shock anybody anymore. All of this makes it incredibly clear the Republican Party as we know it is gone. It's dead. And it's been a long and painful death, one that Trump simply twisted an already inserted dagger in. The Tea Party almost saw to the division and dismantling of the GOP. But like any group of people doing their best to retain the power they have taken, the party moved quickly and aligned itself even further to the conservative right, ensuring the nuttiness of Sarah Palin and others didn't divide the base and allow liberals to take the reins of this country. As they did that, it led to a stronger foundation, actually. By moving further right, it spread the left thinner and thinner across the middle. But there's not much room to keep moving further and further to the conservative right. Another step in that direction is martial law, white supremacy, and the complete removal of women, minority, and gay rights, something Trump might actually be okay with. And Trump, and more so his advisors and allies, took that Tea Party blueprint and made it the MAGA blueprint. Of course, there was more lying, cheating, and a multitude of other sins, but it was very similar. McConnell, Lindsey Graham, as well as the other remaining powerful politicians on that side will do whatever it takes to keep the GOP together, though. Even if that means Trump runs the party from Florida going forward, even if it means it teeters on the edge of white supremacy and removal of equal rights. And this has become even more apparent with Mitch McConnell advising his fellow Republicans on Tuesday to not challenge the Electoral College count when it reaches Congress early next month. With their efforts having nearly no chance in overturning the already decided results, one congressman deciding to be brave and patriotic in the eyes of Trump and MAGA could lead to a very difficult public vote. Republicans don't show fealty above all else and vote to move on past this mess would become blacklisted in the eyes of Trump and his followers, something McConnell knows could negatively impact his party in 2022 and beyond. Okay, let's take a moment. I've been all over the place with this one, I know. I spent the first few minutes ranting about Trump's pathetic and childish attempts to steal an election he claims was stolen. I then talked very briefly about why the Democrats won't retain this power that the GOP is tossing them. And I talked a lot about how Trump could sway voters to stay home or even split the conservative base for future elections. But the point is, many, myself included in that many, thought that America would stand up in 2020 and kick Trump to the curb. And even though we gave him an eviction notice and put Biden and Harris in the White House as early as January, Trump didn't get kicked to the curb. If November proved anything, it's that the Republican Party we know prior to 2016, one that didn't seem as welcoming to Trump and his insanity, is long gone now, and it will remain so far past Trump's departure from the White House in January. A man with over 20 counts of sexual misconduct allegations against him, a man who has been impeached by the House of Representatives, a man that is in debt up to his eyeballs in this country and in foreign ones, a man who refuses to condone white supremacy groups, and a man that just showed us nothing but selfish corruption for 4 years, had more than 72 million Americans vote for him. That's more votes than any other Republican in the history of the United States, and only second to Biden. And if you thought Republican voters didn't give two shits about the quality person they were electing in the past, all for the sakes of keeping their gun rights, their control over women, and their ability to be openly racist, well, you haven't seen anything yet. Trump's tenure is just the start of a new party that will push the most vile and disruptive candidates to the front. That's because Trump just showed the entire nation that it's not only leads to a likely win for that party when they do, but that it ignites a base of voters like never before and energizes a camp so ready to prove their undying loyalty, they'll burn the opposition to the ground. And that is why the GOP party is now Trump's party. It is now the MAGA party, even after January 20th. That's our show for the night and our feed for the year. We wish you a safe and happy holiday as well as a joyous new year. Hey Pro Nerds, thank you once again for listening to Project Nerds Diving Deep, our deep topic podcast that has really covered a lot of politics as of late, but we will continue to get back to our two-format system, one where you'll see special guests as we dive deep into their history and careers and lives, as well as these pre-written shows that are talking about topics that are sometimes hard to swallow. In the coming days, you might notice that this episode, as well as other episodes, are airing on a new feed. That's right, Diving Deep has its own podcast feed. The feed PN1, or the Project Nerd podcast feed that you're familiar with, will remain focused on entertaining fans with pop culture and geeky content. Diving Deep's going to head on over to its own channel here, where it can continue to educate, inform, and discuss these deep topics. Head to wherever you go to get your podcast and search Project Nerds Diving Deep, and make sure you hit that subscribe button. While you're at it, make sure you check out projectnerd.com/podcast to see all our awesome series, as well as learn more about what's ahead in the new year. We'll see you in 2021, folks.